In the quiet corners of Wilmington, North Carolina, where memories hang as thick as the summer humidity, there lives a woman whose hands once nourished greatness, though she never knew it at the time. Rose Martinez sits in her modest living room, surrounded by photographs that tell stories of a life dedicated to serving others. At 80 years old, her hands may have slowed, but they still remember every recipe, every meal, and every young face that passed through her cafeteria line at Emsley Laney High School 4 decades ago. The morning light filters through her window, casting a gentle glow on an old yearbook from 1981. Rose's weathered fingers trace the faces of students she once fed, pausing briefly on a particular young man's photo, a lanky basketball player with determination in his eyes. Back then, he was just another hungry teenager with big dreams. Nobody could have predicted he would become the Michael Jordan we know today. In her small kitchen, where the walls are painted a faded yellow that's seen better days, Rose still starts each morning the same way she did for 30 years at Laney High, by cooking. Her granddaughter Linda watches from the doorway as Rose methodically measures ingredients for her famous sweet potato biscuits, a recipe that once had students lining up early at the cafeteria doors. "You know, Linda," Rose says, her voice carrying the weight of untold stories, "there was this one boy who would always come in early, before the morning basketball practice. He was so skinny back then, all elbows and knees. But Lord, could that child eat?" She chuckles, shaking her head at the memory. "He'd always ask for extra biscuits, said they gave him energy for practice. I never could say no to those hungry eyes." The kitchen fills with the aroma of baking biscuits, a smell that transforms this modest home into a time machine, taking Rose back to those busy mornings in the school cafeteria. She never sought recognition for her work. Feeding hundreds of growing teenagers was simply her calling. Yet there was something special about that particular student, something that went beyond his obvious athletic talent. "He had this way about him," Rose continues, carefully removing the golden brown biscuits from the oven. "Polite always said, 'Yes, ma'am,' and 'Thank you.' Even when he was tired from practice, he'd help carry the heavy flour bags from the delivery truck. Just because he saw me struggling with them one morning." Her eyes mist over with the memory. Linda settles into a kitchen chair, watching her grandmother move about the kitchen with practiced ease. She's heard fragments of these stories before, but today feels different. There's a wistfulness in Rose's voice that speaks of more than just nostalgia. "You miss those days, don't you, Grandma?" Linda asks softly. Rose pauses, her hands covered in flour. "I miss the purpose of it all. Knowing that those children needed me, that I was helping them grow strong." She smiles, but there's a hint of sadness in it. "Sometimes I wonder if any of them remember old Rose from the cafeteria." What Rose doesn't know is that someone does remember, someone whose life she touched in ways she never imagined. Someone who hasn't forgotten the kindness of the cafeteria cook who made sure he never went hungry during those crucial years when his body was growing and his dreams were taking flight. In her living room, among countless photographs of family and former students, there's a small newspaper clipping from 1982. It shows the Laney High basketball team, and in the background, barely visible through the cafeteria window, stands Rose, watching the team photo being taken. She never knew she was in that picture, never realized she had been captured in that moment of history. The afternoon sun casts long shadows across Rose's small garden, where she still grows herbs and vegetables, just like she did for the school cafeteria. Her neighbors often receive bags of fresh produce, along with her homemade biscuits. Even now, she can't help but feed people. It's woven into the fabric of who she is. Robert Davis, a former colleague from Laney High, stops by occasionally to check on her. Today, he finds her sorting through old recipe cards, each one yellowed with age and spotted with the evidence of years of use. "Still got that secret biscuit recipe, Rose?" he asks, settling into the chair across from her. "Secret?" She laughs, the sound rich with memory. "There was never any secret, Robert. Just love. That's all it ever was." She holds up a particularly worn recipe card. "This one here? The sweet potato biscuits? That was his favorite. Used to say they were better than his mama's, but I told him never to let her hear that." Robert watches as Rose carefully tucks the recipe card back into its box. You know, I ran into some of the old teachers last week. They still talk about your cooking. Said the cafeteria was never the same after you retired. Rose waves off the compliment, but her eyes shine with pride. We did what we could with what we had. Those children deserved good food. They were growing, learning, becoming who they were meant to be. She pauses, lost in thought. Some of them had such big dreams. I like to think maybe, in some small way, we helped those dreams along. Linda helps her grandmother prepare dinner, watching as Rose's hands move with muscle memory through the motions of cooking. Every now and then, Rose will stop and share another memory, of pep rallies and basketball games, of quiet mornings in the cafeteria, of young athletes who would sneak in for extra helpings before big games. You know what's funny, Linda? Rose says, stirring a pot of soup. I never even saw him play in the NBA. By then, my eyes were getting bad, and we couldn't afford cable. But I would hear about his games on the radio, and every time they mentioned his name, I'd think about that hungry boy in my cafeteria. As evening approaches, Rose settles into her favorite chair, a photo album open on her lap. Linda notices her grandmother's fingers lingering on certain pages, tracing the outlines of faces from long ago. There's a particular photo, a candid shot of the cafeteria during lunch hour, that always makes Rose smile. That was taken during his senior year, she explains, pointing to a blurry figure in the lunch line. Look how tall he'd gotten by then. But still skinny, still coming back for seconds of those biscuits. What Rose doesn't realize is that her simple acts of kindness, the extra portions, the early morning biscuits, the encouraging words, were more than just part of her job. They were building blocks in the foundation of greatness, quiet moments of nurturing that helped fuel a future legend. As night falls over Wilmington, Rose prepares for bed, her daily routine unchanged for decades. She sets out her clothes for the next day, checks that the kitchen is tidy, and says her prayers. Tonight, as always, she includes a prayer for all her children, the thousands of students she fed over the years, hoping they found their way to their dreams. Good night, Grandma, Linda says, helping Rose adjust her pillows. Good night, dear, Rose replies, then adds with a soft laugh, you know, I dreamed about the cafeteria last night. Dreamed I was making those biscuits again, and all the children were lined up, waiting. Funny how those memories stay with you. What Rose doesn't know is that memories have a way of coming full circle. That sometimes, the kindness we put into the world finds its way back to us in the most unexpected ways. And that somewhere out there, a basketball legend hasn't forgotten the woman who made sure he never went hungry during those formative years at Laney High. As she drifts off to sleep, the scent of sweet potato biscuits still lingering in her kitchen, Rose Martinez has no idea that her quiet life is about to change. That the boy she once fed, now one of the most famous athletes in history, has been thinking about those morning biscuits, about the kind cafeteria cook who always had a smile and an extra portion for a hungry young basketball player. Tomorrow will be just another day for Rose, or so she thinks. But sometimes, the most extraordinary moments come disguised as ordinary days, and the greatest acts of kindness are returned when we least expect them. In the heart of Chicago, where success casts long shadows across the city skyline, Michael Jordan sits in his private office, surrounded by the gleaming trophies of an unparalleled career. But today, his mind isn't on championships or accolades. Instead, he's holding a worn photograph, a simple snapshot from his high school days at Laney that someone recently sent him on social media. The image shows the school cafeteria, and there, barely visible in the background, is a familiar face that stirs something deep in his memory. The kind eyes, the warm smile, the flour-dusted apron, Mrs. Martinez, the cafeteria cook who always made sure he had enough to eat during those crucial years when his body was trying to catch up with his dreams. As he studies the photograph, memories flood back. The aroma of fresh-baked biscuits wafting through the cafeteria before dawn. The sound of Mrs. Martinez humming gospel tunes while she worked. The way she'd slip an extra portion onto his tray with a conspiratorial wink, saying, "Growing boys need their strength." Jordan reaches for his phone, calling his assistant. "I need you to find someone for me," he says, his voice carrying the weight of purpose. "Rose Martinez. She was the cook at Laney High School in Wilmington during my time there." Early 1980s. He pauses, remembering something else. She made these sweet potato biscuits that kept me going through morning practice. Meanwhile, in Wilmington, Rose's small house buzzes with unusual activity. Linda has convinced her grandmother to participate in a local community center program where seniors share their life stories with young people. Rose sits at her kitchen table, surrounded by old photographs and memorabilia from her years at Laney High. "I don't know why anyone would want to hear my stories," Rose says, sorting through a stack of faded photographs. "I was just a cook, Linda. Just did what needed doing." Linda adjusts the camera she's setting up to record her grandmother's stories. "That's exactly why people need to hear your story, Grandma. Sometimes the biggest impact comes from the smallest acts of kindness." Rose smooths her apron. She still wears one every day, a habit of decades, and begins to speak. Her voice, warm and rich with memory, fills the kitchen. "I started at Laney High in 1975. Back then, the cafeteria was the heart of the school. Not just a place to eat, it was where children could find warmth on cold mornings, where they could feel safe, where they knew someone cared." She pauses, reaching for an old recipe box. "We didn't have much to work with, school budget was always tight. But we learned to make magic with what we had. These recipes?" She pats the box lovingly. "They're not just about measurements and ingredients. They're about paying attention, about noticing which children needed extra care, extra food, extra love." As Rose speaks, Linda's camera captures the subtle emotions playing across her grandmother's face: pride, nostalgia, and something deeper, a quiet satisfaction in knowing she made a difference, even if the world never knew. "There was this one morning," Rose continues, her eyes distant with memory, "when our delivery truck broke down. We had no fresh bread for breakfast, and I knew the basketball team had an important game that day. So I came in at 3 in the morning to make biscuits from scratch. Must have made hundreds of them." She laughs softly, shaking her head. "The coach came to the cafeteria later that day. Said it was the best game some of his players ever played. Said whatever I put in those biscuits must have been magic." In Chicago, Jordan's team is making progress. They've traced Rose to her current address, discovered she's still living in Wilmington. Jordan studies the information, a plan forming in his mind. "She never missed a day," he tells his assistant. "Never complained when I'd show up before hours, hungry and tired from training. She'd just turn on those kitchen lights and start cooking." Back in Wilmington, Rose and Linda take a break from recording. They sit on the front porch, watching the neighborhood children play basketball on a makeshift court across the street. The familiar sound of a bouncing ball carries through the evening air. "You know," Rose says, her voice thoughtful, "watching those children play reminds me of all the young athletes we fed over the years. Some of them came from such difficult circumstances. Basketball was their way out, their chance at something better. We might not have been coaches or teachers, but we knew how to feed their dreams." Linda watches her grandmother's face in the fading light. "Did you ever imagine any of them would become famous?" Rose shakes her head. "Famous? No, that wasn't what we thought about. We just wanted them to be healthy, to have enough energy to chase whatever dreams they had. Though I will say," she adds with a smile, "there was this one boy who had something special, a fire in his eyes. Even when he got cut from the varsity team his sophomore year, he didn't give up. Just worked harder." Inside the house, the phone begins to ring. Linda goes to answer it, leaving Rose on the porch with her memories. The evening air is thick with the scent of jasmine from her small garden, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell chimes. "Grandma," Linda calls from inside, her voice carrying an unusual note of excitement. "There's someone asking about your time at Laney High. They want to do a special interview about the school's history." Rose waves her hand dismissively. "Oh, I don't know about that. Who'd want to interview an old cafeteria cook?" But the wheels are already in motion. In Chicago, Jordan reviews the final details of his plan. He picks up the photograph again, studying Mrs. Martinez's face in the background. Success has brought him everything he could have dreamed of, but it's the small kindnesses from his journey that have stayed with him. The coach who gave him a chance, the teacher who believed in him, and the cafeteria cook who made sure he never went hungry. Sometimes, he tells his assistant. It's not about the big moments everyone sees. It's about the quiet ones that nobody notices. The ones that make all the other moments possible. In Wilmington, the sun sets on another quiet day. Rose goes through her evening routine, unaware that her life is about to change. She checks her recipe box one last time, a habit of decades, and finds the sweet potato biscuit recipe that became her signature dish. Maybe I should make these for the interview, she muses to Linda. Show them how we did things back then. Linda helps her grandmother up the stairs to bed, each step a reminder of the years passing. That's a wonderful idea, Grandma. I think there are still plenty of people who need to hear your story. As Rose settles into bed, her thoughts drift back to those early mornings in the Laney High cafeteria. The sound of basketball practice echoing down the hallways. The smell of fresh biscuits rising in the ovens. The sight of hungry teenagers, their whole lives ahead of them, filing through her lunch line. You know what I miss most? She tells Linda. The moments before sunrise, when the kitchen was quiet except for the sound of dough being kneaded. Knowing that what I was doing mattered, even if nobody else saw it. Linda tucks the blanket around her grandmother's shoulders, understanding that sometimes the most profound acts of kindness are the ones that go unnoticed, unrecorded, but never forgotten by those whose lives they touched. And somewhere between Chicago and Wilmington, a plan is set in motion, a chance for one of those hungry teenagers, now a legend, to say thank you to the woman who helped fuel his dreams, one biscuit at a time. The morning sun hasn't yet touched the horizon when Rose Martinez begins her day, just as she has for the past 60 years. Today is supposed to be special, the community center interview Linda arranged. Rose decided to do what she's always done when facing important moments. She bakes. The kitchen comes alive with familiar sounds, the whir of the old mixer, the soft pat of dough being kneaded, the gentle clinking of measuring spoons. The sweet potato biscuits are more than just a recipe, they're a connection to every morning she spent nurturing young bodies and spirits at Laney High. What Rose doesn't know is that across town, in the newly renovated Laney High School gymnasium, Michael Jordan himself is walking the familiar halls. He arrived before dawn, wanting to revisit these corridors without fanfare or cameras. His footsteps echo through the empty building as he makes his way toward the cafeteria. The space has been modernized, but Jordan can still see it as it was, the old serving line where Mrs. Martinez stood every day, the tables where he and his teammates would gather, the window where she'd sometimes watch their practice sessions while preparing lunch. He pulls out his phone, checking the time. Everything is in place. Back at Rose's house, Linda helps her grandmother pack up the fresh biscuits. The community center called, she says, trying to keep her voice steady. They asked if we could do the interview at Laney High instead. They're doing a piece about the school's history. Rose pauses, her hands hovering over the basket of biscuits. The school? I haven't been back there since I retired. Her voice carries a mix of emotions, nostalgia, nervousness, excitement. They said it would mean a lot, Linda adds, carefully wrapping the still warm biscuits. Something about capturing the real spirit of the place. The drive to Laney High is quiet, Rose lost in thought as familiar landmarks pass by. The school building comes into view, and her heart quickens. So many memories held within those brick walls, so many lives touched, so many dreams nurtured. Linda parks near the gymnasium entrance, where Robert Davis, Rose's old colleague, is waiting. His presence surprises her, but adds to the comfort of returning to this place that held so much of her life. Rose, he greets her warmly, it's good to see you back here where you belong. The halls are quiet, it's Saturday morning after all, as they make their way toward the cafeteria. Rose's steps slow as they approach the double doors, her hand reaching out to touch the familiar handle. Looks different now, Robert comments, pushing the door open. But some things never change. The lights are dim as they enter, and Rose clutches her basket of biscuits closer. I remember when these lights would flicker every morning, she says softly. Had to jiggle the switch just right to get them working. Suddenly, the lights come on fully, and Rose blinks in surprise. The cafeteria has been transformed. The modern serving line is decorated with photographs from her years at Laney, moments she hadn't even known were captured. Students lined up for lunch, her serving meals with a smile, quiet moments of her working in the kitchen. But it's the tall figure standing by her old serving station that makes her breath catch. Michael Jordan steps forward, his presence both commanding and gentle. "Mrs. Martinez," he says, his voice carrying across the quiet cafeteria, "I've been hoping to thank you for those early morning biscuits." Rose's hands tremble on her basket. "Michael," she whispers, hardly daring to believe her eyes. "Is it really you?" He crosses the space between them with those long strides she remembers so well, though now he moves with the grace of a man rather than the eagerness of a teenage boy. "It's me, Mrs. Martinez. Still remember how you used to sneak me extra portions before practice?" Tears well in Rose's eyes as Jordan carefully takes the basket from her shaking hands, setting it aside before enveloping her in a gentle hug. "My boy," she says softly, patting his back just as she used to do. "You grew up so fine. Thanks to people like you," Jordan responds, his own voice thick with emotion. People who cared enough to notice a hungry kid who needed a little extra help to grow. The moment stretches between them, decades of unspoken gratitude finally finding its voice. When they part, Jordan gestures to the basket. "Are those what I think they are?" Rose laughs, wiping her eyes. "Sweet potato biscuits. Made them fresh this morning. Some things you never forget how to do." Jordan leads her to a table where coffee and plates have been set up. As they sit, he pulls out an old photograph, the one that started this journey. "Someone sent this to me," he explains, showing her the image where she stands in the background. "Made me remember all those mornings when you'd open early, just because you knew some of us would be hungry after practice." Rose studies the photograph, her fingers tracing the edges. "We didn't have much back then," she says. "But what we had, we shared. That's all." "That's everything," Jordan corrects her gently. "You know, I've had some of the finest meals in the world, Mrs. Martinez. Eaten at restaurants most people can only dream about. But I've never forgotten the taste of your biscuits, or the kindness that came with them." Linda and Robert watch from a distance as Rose opens her basket, bringing out the still warm biscuits. Jordan's eyes light up with recognition as she hands him one. "Just like I remember," he says after taking a bite. "Maybe even better." "Well," Rose says with a hint of her old teasing manner, "you're not so skinny anymore. Don't need to fatten you up like I used to." They share a laugh, and Jordan becomes serious. "Mrs. Martinez, I want you to know something. All those championships, all those awards, they came from hard work, yes. But they also came from people like you, who cared enough to support that hard work. Who understood that sometimes, a hungry kid needs more than just food." Rose nods, understanding. "You always had something special, Michael. A fire in you. All I did was help keep that fire burning. And that's why I'm here today," Jordan continues, reaching for a folder he had set aside. "I want to make sure your kindness keeps spreading, keeps helping other hungry kids with dreams." He opens the folder, revealing documents for the Rose Martinez Nutrition and Education Fund, a new foundation established in her name, dedicated to providing meals and support for student athletes in need. "Michael," Rose breathes, her hand covering her mouth. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did," he interrupts gently. "Because somewhere out there, there's another skinny kid with big dreams, who needs someone like you in their corner. And now, thanks to you, they'll have that chance." The morning light streams through the cafeteria windows, casting a warm glow over this reunion decades in the making. In this moment, the distance between past and present, between the hungry young athlete and the legendary champion, between the caring cafeteria cook and the woman being honored, dissolves into something timeless, the simple power of kindness, remembered and returned. And as Rose Martinez sits across from Michael Jordan, sharing the biscuits she baked just that morning, she understands that sometimes the greatest rewards come not from seeking recognition, but from simply doing what needs to be done, feeding those who are hungry, and believing in dreams that have yet to take flight. News of Michael Jordan's surprise visit to Laney High School spreads quickly through Wilmington. By afternoon, the story of the basketball legend and the elderly cafeteria cook has captured hearts across the nation. But in a quiet corner of the school cafeteria, Rose Martinez and Michael Jordan remain absorbed in conversation, sharing memories that bridged the decades between them. "You remember Tommy Williams?" Rose asks, pouring another cup of coffee. "Used to come in with you for those early breakfasts. Always said he couldn't play worth a dime if he didn't have my biscuits first." Jordan laughs, the sound echoing through the cafeteria. "Tommy. He'd get so mad when I'd beat him to the cafeteria line. Said I was hoarding all the good biscuits." His expression softens. "He's a coach now, did you know that? Says he feeds his players breakfast before practice, just like you used to do for us." Rose's eyes fill with tears again, but this time they're tears of joy. That's what it's all about, isn't it? Passing on the love, making sure the next generation knows someone cares. Jordan nods, reaching into his jacket pocket. "Speaking of the next generation," he says, pulling out a stack of letters. "When we were planning this surprise, we reached out to some of your former students. Asked them if they remembered the Laney High cafeteria cook. Mrs. Martinez, I think you should read these." Rose's hands tremble as she takes the first letter. Linda moves closer, sitting beside her grandmother as she begins to read aloud. "Dear Mrs. Martinez, you probably won't remember me. I was that skinny freshman who could never afford lunch. You always made sure I had something to eat, always told me it was just extras that would go to waste anyway. I knew better, but you let me keep my pride. Today, I run a food bank in Charlotte. Every morning, we serve breakfast to kids who need it. Just like you did for me. Thank you for teaching me that feeding people is about more than just food." Another letter reads, "Mrs. Martinez, remember how you used to save the day-old bread for me to take home? My little sisters never knew it wasn't fresh from the store. That kindness taught me something I've never forgotten, that dignity is as important as charity. I'm a teacher now, and I keep snacks in my desk for kids who need them. No questions asked, just like you." Jordan watches as Rose reads letter after letter, each one a testament to the quiet impact she had on countless lives. "You see, Mrs. Martinez? Your legacy isn't just in those biscuit recipes. It's in every person you helped, every kindness you showed, every dream you nourished." Robert Davis, who has been quietly observing, steps forward. "Rose, remember what you always used to say. A hungry child can't learn, and a learning child can't stay hungry. You lived by those words every single day." The afternoon sun casts long shadows through the cafeteria windows as Jordan explains more about the foundation established in her name. The Rose Martinez Nutrition and Education Fund will ensure that no student-athlete at Laney High ever goes hungry. But it's more than that. We're establishing programs in schools across North Carolina, teaching them what you taught us, that sometimes the greatest acts of love come with a side of biscuits. Linda watches as her grandmother absorbs this information, seeing the decades of unrecognized service finally receiving their due. "Grandma," she says softly, "all those stories you've been sharing with me, all those memories you thought nobody would care about, they mattered. They still matter." Jordan stands, moving to the old serving line. "Mrs. Martinez, would you mind showing me one more time how to serve these biscuits properly? For old time's sake." Rose laughs, rising from her chair with newfound energy. "Michael Jordan, don't tell me you forgot the proper way to handle a serving spoon." She makes her way behind the counter, muscle memory taking over as she demonstrates the perfect scoop and serve technique she used thousands of times. "The secret," she explains, her voice carrying the weight of wisdom, "is to make sure every serving comes with a smile. Food feeds the body, but kindness feeds the soul." As word of the reunion spreads, local news crews gather outside the school. But inside, in this sacred space of memory and gratitude, time seems to stand still. Jordan shares stories of his professional career, of championships and victories, but always comes back to those morning practices fueled by Rose's cooking and care. "You know what I remembered most during those tough games?" he tells her. "The smell of your kitchen at dawn. How you'd say, 'You can't be great on an empty stomach.' Those words stuck with me, Mrs. Martinez. Through every championship, every victory, every defeat, I remembered that someone believed in me enough to wake up before sunrise just to make sure I had a good breakfast." Rose reaches out, patting his hand just as she used to do. And look how far that belief took you. As the afternoon wanes, Jordan presents Rose with one final surprise, a custom-made cookbook, bound in leather, containing all her cafeteria recipes, along with photographs and memories from her years at Laney High. So your legacy will never be forgotten, he explains. Rose opens the cookbook with reverence, finding her sweet potato biscuit recipe given pride of place. But it's the inscription that brings fresh tears to her eyes. To Mrs. Rose Martinez, who fed our dreams as well as our bodies. Your kindness changed lives, one meal at a time. The news crews are finally allowed in, capturing the moment as Jordan and Rose stand together behind the serving line, sharing one last batch of her famous biscuits. But the real story isn't in the photos or the headlines. It's in the quiet exchange of glances between a basketball legend and the woman who once made sure he never played on an empty stomach. Mrs. Martinez, Jordan says as the day draws to a close, you know what they say about my career, about the championships, the records, the legendary games. But some of the most important moments happened right here, in this cafeteria, with you making sure I had what I needed to grow strong. Rose looks around the cafeteria one last time, seeing not the modern appliances and new serving lines, but the ghosts of thousands of children she fed over the years. We all have our parts to play, she says softly. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness have the biggest impact. As they prepare to leave, Jordan has one more question. Mrs. Martinez, would you do me the honor of attending our first foundation event? We're going to teach kids how to make those famous biscuits of yours. Rose's face lights up with joy. Only if you promise to help with the demonstrations. After all these years, it's about time you learn the recipe properly. The laughter they share echoes through the cafeteria, bridging past and present, joining the countless other moments of joy and connection that these walls have witnessed. Outside, the world waits to tell their story, the basketball legend and the cafeteria cook, the hunger and the nourishment, the kindness given and remembered. But the real story, the one that matters most, is written in the hearts of every person Rose Martinez ever fed, in every dream she helped sustain, in every act of kindness inspired by her example. And now, through the Rose Martinez Nutrition and Education Fund, that story will continue, feeding new dreams, nourishing new hopes, reminding us all that the greatest achievements often begin with the simplest acts of love. As Jordan helps Rose down the cafeteria steps one last time, she pauses, looking back at the place where she spent so many years of her life. You know, she says, her voice filled with quiet wisdom, some people might say I was just a cook. But I like to think I was feeding futures, one meal at a time. No, Mrs. Martinez, Jordan replies, his voice thick with emotion. You were feeding legends. We just didn't know it at the time. And in that moment, as the setting sun paints the sky in shades of gold and purple, the story of Rose Martinez and Michael Jordan becomes more than just a tale of reunion and gratitude. It becomes a testament to the power of kindness, a reminder that no act of love is ever truly small, and proof that sometimes the greatest champions are the ones working quietly behind the scenes, making sure that young dreams have the nourishment they need to soar.